Baby, I'm playing on you tonight. Hunt you down, eat you alive. Just like animals, animals like animals. Moles.
Hey there, I'm Dave.
And I'm Emil.
And so we're here today to continue our blogcast series on our advanced Windows deployments and specifically hydrating the environment. And so in the previous blogcasts, we covered starting with an environment from pretty much scratch, just a bare Hyper-V hypervisor. We used some scripts to create some VMs, and we used a process called hydration to build our Active Directory domain and to build our SQL Server components and Configuration Manager components that are going to be required to go through the lab that we set forth in the book. And so, Emil, what were some of the things that we did in the previous blog posts just to catch people up if they're jumping right in on this video?
So after going through the hydration process and creating that base environment, there were a series of post-installation tasks that we had to configure. We had to go in and create some GPOs to extend the Windows firewall, enabling us to access these workstations from the config manager, the console. That allowed us to do client push. We went ahead and we added a role inside of Configuration Manager to get the reporting services point installed. And we also went through and did some discovery methods to get the clients in our enterprise inside of Configuration Manager where we were able to deploy them.
Awesome. So I think it's important for viewers to understand where we were a year ago when we started designing this book and really the layout and the framework for this book. One of the things that was of utmost importance to Emil and myself was to make sure that we could emulate production scenarios as closely as we could going through the book, and also giving readers of the book the ability to take and replicate what we had done. So to follow along with those steps and those tasks. But in doing that, we quickly realized that most of the step-by-step instructions specific to Configuration Manager and OS deployment basically take you through almost like a next finish type scenario. They don't really start you with something that would look like a production environment.
No, and us to walk you through these next finish windows provides very little value, because what we find is it's a heck of a lot easier to script these things, to put them into PowerShell, and especially the repeatable processes that we're performing in our lab. We actually see people use these out in the world, so we figured why not implement scripts into this process as well.
So from cradle to grave, what we tried to do as much as possible was build a post-configuration hydration script. And this hydration script, what we wanted it to do was to walk through all of the basic functions and constructs that somebody would have to go through in order to have a functional Configuration Manager environment. So from the creation of software packages to the programs to the collections, the deployments, all of the objects that you'd see inside that you'd have to go through and manually click and touch inside of Configuration Manager, we built into one big script. And so when somebody takes and runs through the initial hydration, they can run through this second hydration script, and now they're going to have what would be closer to like a production-ready environment. In theory, they could take one of those clients that we'd already deployed the Config Manager client out to, and they could take and start deploying the software packages that we've already built.
Exactly, and this process to do manually could take a day, right? Because there's about 15 applications in there that we've got created. You've got to script all those so that they're silent packages. They don't require any reboots or no user interaction. So it takes a lot of effort to tweak that to a point where it's what we consider silent. And being able to provide you a script here will save you a lot of time in building your lab environment.
And so, Emil, like most of the things we do, we're community driven for a lot of our initiatives that we have. We want to try to just kind of improve the ecosystem that's out there around Configuration Manager and just IT technology in general. So are we going to give people a copy of this script so they can use it kind of as a starter for their own environments or labs if they want to?
Yes, absolutely. These scripts are all available up on deploymentfundamentals.com.
Awesome. So what we'll do now is why don't we jump right into the demo, and then I can kind of show off here maybe a little bit what these hydration scripts will do for us.
Okay, great.
Okay, so we're in our lab environment here, and we're on our Configuration Manager server CMO1. So just a couple of housekeeping notes here. I have prepped a couple things in order to get these scripts to run here properly for us. Number one is I've taken and I've downloaded all of the sample files off of the Deployment Fundamentals site. So these are the associated files that go with the book, and these are freely available if people just want to try to follow along on their own, although we'd really kind of appreciate it if they pick up the book as well. Shameless plug. And what I've done is I've taken and I've downloaded these scripts and these post-install files into a folder called C Drive Lab Files. And so what you're going to get as a download from the site are all of these particular folders. You're going to get an image factory, LTI support files, scripts, and ZTI support files, okay? And so the script that we're going to use for CM hydration is going to be located inside of the scripts folder, and it's called Hydration CM Configuration. So that's the one that we're going to use, okay? And another important note here is that unfortunately we're not able to give away the software that we use in the book as a download from our site. So what you'll have to do in order to run these scripts is you'll simply have to follow the instructions that are laid out in the book. And what we might do is make an associated blog post here just showing where you can actually get these files from. So what we've got is a couple pieces of 1E software. I use Adobe Reader, Camtasia, Link client, and a Snagit client. So you're going to have to download each of these respective files and put them in the associated folders. So what we'll do is we'll actually do a little blog write-up on this particular piece if you want to actually download this software and know where to get it from. But for the purposes of what we're doing here today in the video, just understand that we pre-downloaded the software, we placed it inside of the correct folders, and the folder names have to be specific because my script is going to look at these particular folders. Okay? So that's it. That's all I've done is I've downloaded some software and downloaded our sample scripts that are available from Deployment Fundamentals. Alright, so now the next thing I'd like to do is just talk a little bit about using PowerShell with Configuration Manager. So when I open up my PowerShell ISE, one of the things I want you to notice here is that I'm using the x86 version. And why is that, Emil? Why do we need to take and do that?
That's because we're doing console manipulations here, things that will be accessed by the console, and the Configuration Manager console in 2012 is still a 32-bit application.
Okay, so what would happen if we tried to execute that in a normal 64-bit PowerShell?
You'd get a big red fail.
Okay, sounds good. So we know as a note to self that we have to use an x86 version of this stuff. So there's actually two scripts here that we're going to have to run. So number one is we normally like to have a standardized folder location when we're working with operating system deployment, correct? And so what we like to do is create some folders in here, like our migration data folder, a logging folder. We have an SCCM_sources folder where we can take and store some software. We're going to take and create a share here, set some permissions on the share, and so forth. So we'll basically have a share created called SCCM_sources $, and that's where we're going to map all of our package source locations to, correct?
And this is a common experience that you'll see out in the enterprise as well. The majority of Config Manager administrators will always put all of their source location in the same spot, be that a local drive on the Config Manager server or on a CIF share on the SAN, whatnot. They typically like to always keep them together. Because we run Configuration Manager in virtual operating systems, we like to keep the sources directory on a VHD that's right onto our Configuration Manager server. The main reason for that is for backup purposes. When we take a backup of our Config Manager server now, we have not just the Config Manager environment itself, but all the source software as well that we could possibly deploy throughout our enterprise.
Yeah, and in production, one of the other things that I like to do, Emil, is I actually like to have this on a dedicated volume to make sure that I'm not going to fill up a drive that's maybe containing Configuration Manager source files or files required to run the actual application that is Configuration Manager. And the other reason for that is if we install Configuration Manager on Windows 2012, or Windows 2012 R2, we can actually leverage the native Windows deduplication features, and we can actually deduplicate this content, and we can really save a lot of space on those volumes, because a lot of the setup files, their binary blocks are going to actually be very close to one another. So we'll see a pretty high compression ratio there. All right, so let's go ahead and run this. I'm not going to take and just run the script itself. I'll just run the internal components of the script. So what we'll do is we'll just go ahead and we'll build those folders. And now if I go actually check the output of this on my D drive, I should have an sccm underscore sources folder, which I do right here. I've got an OSD folder pre-created with everything there, and I've also got a software folder created. So that's excellent. That's exactly what we wanted to do. And then that should have also been shared out as well. So let's just go ahead and validate that the share has been created here. So if I go to the sharing tab, and we can see that it has been shared as sccm underscore sources $. So that's fantastic. The first part of this appears to have worked properly. All right, so now let's go ahead and let's take a look at the next script that we've got. And this one here is where, in all honesty, a lot of the magic's going to happen. I have to say that, you know, I've got to give a little bit of credit in here where credit is due. So I did a lot of the work on the initial construct of this particular script, and you can see the date of my initial creation of this script. It was April 3rd of 2014.
Almost a year ago.
Almost 1 year ago today, we had actually started building this script. So that's how far into the book we were at this time last year. And it took probably the better part of 3 to 4 weeks of tweaking and tuning. I didn't have time to work on this full time, unfortunately. I still had a day job. But in the evenings and stuff, when I had some time, we threw into this. And then I had some terrific help from Alan Rayfuse, who's a good friend of mine, and so is also a colleague of mine for years. And so he's a scripting master, and you know, he was actually a big help for us on building a lot of the scripts for the book. So he helped me tweak this a little bit, and then we also had Johan as well. So Johan went through and made another cut through the script. It doesn't have all the full error control and production checking that we might want, but it does the job for a lab environment, right? The real purpose of this was to show people the power of PowerShell with Configuration Manager. And for all intents and purposes, anything you can do in the GUI, you can pretty much do inside of PowerShell or script it. So that was really the goal behind this. So I'm not going to bore you with a bunch of the construct of what goes on inside of the script here. We're just going to go ahead and run this, okay? So what we're going to do is we're just going to browse out to the folder path here. And you can run this in a regular PowerShell, or I can just run this actually directly from the ISE itself, or I can just step through it in the ISE. So maybe that's all we'll do, is we'll just run this right from the ISE. And in order to do this, I might have to set my execution policy to allow this script to run, because it's not digitally signed, which is pretty normal for scripts that you download off the internet. So we'll go ahead and run that. And it says, oh, oops, we're actually missing some files. Oh, that's interesting. So we've got a little bit of error control in here, and we can see that we're actually missing a version of Adobe Reader version 11. So this is actually a really important point for the lab. One of the challenges that we found in running this was that if we were missing a file or something was broken, that, you know, we weren't able to take and actually run this properly. So if we go troubleshoot this for a second, I'm going to go check that AWD software folder on the C drive. I think what ended up happening here is throughout the revisions of the book, we may have actually changed the version of Adobe Reader, because my version I'd created a custom MST for, and we didn't really want to do that. So we can see that, you know, my version here is a little bit different. So my MSI version, the file name, everything's a little different. So my error control in the script is actually doing what it's supposed to. So what we're going to do is we're just going to pause the video real quick. We're going to go grab this file. We're going to place it into the correct folder here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and then rerun the installation from there. Sound good?
Perfect.
Okay, so we're back. I've grabbed that file. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and try rerunning this again and see if we're a little bit more successful this time, Emil. So good thing for, you know, error checking, right? Go ahead and rerun this. And it looks like we're actually missing another file here. So it looks like we're missing the Nomad download monitor. So we'll come back again and we'll fix this one. Okay, oops, so I guess that's my bad there, Emil. I forgot to actually copy over an entire folder of software here that was required as part of the lab.
How could you?
And so this one here was actually a sources folder, so I actually had a bit of additional software in there. So let's go ahead and third time lucky, what do you think?
Let's try it.
All right. So let's go ahead and run this. Awesome, this looks a little bit better. So what this is going to do is this is going to import the Configuration Manager PowerShell module. And what I'm going to do is, as this script runs, is I'm just going to try to maybe step everybody through what's going on here. So we'll just kind of maximize this. Now what it's going to do is it's going to create some base folders inside of Configuration Manager. So I like to organize things inside the console. So that's what's happening here. Now it's going to take and it's going to start creating some collections. So this is actually creating a series of collections inside of Configuration Manager. And I don't know if people notice this. I used to have a Configuration Manager console running in the background. I found during the time I was building this script that we had some issues, so I actually closed the ConfigMan console while I'm running this script. So we're still building some of our base collections that we're going to be using throughout the course of the lab, and there's several of them. I don't know exactly how many I created, but there's a lot.
We place all of these inside of an AWD folder as well. So if you happen to be running this in your own lab environment that you've already got stuff in, we're not going to drop 20 or 30 collections right into the root. So we do keep it nice and clean for you.
Well, and anybody that's worked inside a Configuration Manager, just the process of something as simple as creating a collection is probably half a dozen clicks just to get one collection created. And that's where the power of actually scripting this comes in. So we're creating a collection for pretty much every software package that we have from a deployment perspective. We'll have some OSD collections that are created, and as soon as this is done, then what will happen is we'll start actually going through the creation of the packages that are going to be required for our lab environment as well. So very, very powerful script that we built. Like I said, some very basic prerequisites. Just put the software in the right locations, and you can run this script after the fact. Probably takes a couple minutes to actually pile through and run everything here.
And that's a lot better than a day that it would take to manually do this.
Absolutely, and the other really nice thing about this, Emil, it's actually really easy to undo everything that this script does by simply just using remove PowerShell function. So I can actually get rid of all the folders, I can get rid of all the collections, I can get rid of all the pieces of software, all the deployments. I can do all of that inside the environment. So that's pretty cool that we can take and that we can see kind of what's going on. This will be done, the creation of the collections, in just a moment. So what we'll do is we'll maybe just kind of stay live with you just to see what happens going through the script. Trust me, it's not like a half an hour process or anything like that we're going to be going through and waiting for the script to complete. The collections probably do take the longest amount of time to create. And so we're actually just getting right to the end of the collections. So it looks like we've also got a collection in there to deploy the CM Trace logging tool, which is one of the ones that we really liked. So I think maybe Emil, pause the video for a couple seconds and we'll come back as soon as this is done. Oh, actually, we're done creating the collections now. So now we're copying a bit of the software. Now, do you remember the locations that we like to store everything? We had the D drive SCCM _ sources.
Right.
So this is where it's actually copying all the software to now. So I've got these applications that we're going to be using throughout the lab. And so what this is doing is it's actually copying those over there. Now it's creating packages and programs for each of those respective applications that we wanted to install in Configuration Manager. Once again, a lot of click-throughs would have been involved if we would have tried to do all of this the manual way. Now this one here is actually allowing deployment of these particular programs via a task sequence. So it's a little checkbox that needs to get enabled on the individual packages. Now we'll go ahead and distribute each of these pieces of software. So once we take and we build these objects called packages in Configuration Manager, then what we have to do is we have to then link them into our distribution point, which is a role inside of Configuration Manager used for software distribution. And so what we'll do is we'll do all of that process for you automatically. Then now what we're going to do is we're going to actually deploy some of these packages out to those respective collections that we'd created earlier. So if we have one of these PCs that would have been a member of one of those collections, it's now actually going to have software distributed to it. So in theory, what I should be able to do is go find one of those collections inside of Configuration Manager, and we should be able to take and run a machine policy refresh, and software should be available for us to now take and to install. So that's kind of the power of my script. Emil, what do you think about that?
I think that's great, Dave. It's your 3 or 4 weeks of work to save me 1 day of effort it was greatly appreciated.
No problem. So let's go ahead and let's open this up here. And so we're just going to open up the Configuration Manager console, and let's take a look at some of the things that my script has nicely done for us. So the first thing I guess we'll do is we'll just expand device collections here. You guys are going to notice that we have now 2 folders created in here. One is called AWD and one is called software. So my script did this. If I click on AWD, now you'll see that we have a series of collections that have nicely been created inside of here. And we've got, so it looks like we've got a little bit of membership across most of these collections as well, so that's also fantastic. I can come down to the software. This was just a staging folder that I had created. We weren't really going to use it for much. Come down to the software library. I'll come into application management and packages. Once again, I'll have a folder in here called AWD. I like to organize this stuff properly, so you'll see I only have the default packages that are created with Configuration Manager here. And then I've got all of my packages that are created, and you'll notice the state of these packages, Emil. You notice how the state is that they're actually targeted at a distribution point, and they're in a green state here. That means that my distribution of these packages to the distribution points has actually been successful. So that's kind of good news for us, I would think, right? And yeah, so that's generally speaking what I do going through the creation of this script, because now we've actually got some kind of usable work items in here. The only thing my script doesn't really do is take an existing task sequence and like import it in, but that's fine because we go through those steps. We'll go through those steps in a later video. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to pause the video here real quick. We'll jump over to, let's say, maybe PC 0001. And let's go see if these packages are now available on what should be a Configuration Manager client. Sound like a good plan?
Okay, let's go.
Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and click on the Install button now. All right, so we can see that it's actually downloading our software for us. It's finished downloading from the distribution point. It's running our silent installation, and in a couple seconds here, we should have Adobe nicely delivered down to this machine. And we can see the icon has nicely appeared here. So kind of, I think, mission accomplished for our hydration here. What do you think, Emil?
Absolutely, Dave. That's a great script.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I think our demo part of this is done. So I'll go ahead and pause the video here and we'll come back in just one sec. Okay, so Emil, another great demo series that we just had there walking through the post-configuration hydration. Would it be safe to say that that would almost take somebody at least a day's worth of work if they were trying to configure that on their own for the first time, trying to get all those basic things configured in Configuration Manager?
Oh, easily. And again, that's only if you already had all the logic for those collection queries and everything that were created inside of that script. So, I mean, going from scratch, I would say more than that, more like 2 days.
Yeah, for sure. And the other thing is that I think it's very important for us as consultants to have a very consistent and repeatable process that we have when we go work with our clients. So we'll actually run scripts like that on our production installs to maybe not use the word hydration, but maybe prime the environments with all of the components that we like to see. So for example, if we have customers that are going to want to pilot the deployment of Adobe Reader or some free software packages, we can actually get them started with that right out of the gate. So what we love to do is really cut down that deployment time for those mundane next finish type activities and try to script those pieces as much as possible.
Right, and that leaves us more opportunity and more time to train that staff and make sure that when our engagement is complete, the staff that are managing Configuration Manager are really able to hit the ground running and manage their environment going forward.
So would it be safe to say that we're maybe done our post-configuration hydration tasks now? Or are we going to actually be able to get into maybe doing some OSD work now in the next set of blogcasts that we have?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we validated very much a good portion of the Configuration Manager environment and via Monster itself. We've got accounts working, we've got computers working, there's memberships inside of Configuration Manager, and we've even gone through and successfully deployed a piece of software. So we know software distribution, management points, all that communication to and from the client and the console is working correctly.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys very much for watching our blogcast video today, and so we look forward to seeing you in the next one.
Yes, our next video will be focusing on the initial installations now of our 1E tool set. So we're going to look at the active efficiency installation and the implementation of Nomad Enterprise into the environment.
Perfect. And just one more final note. Emil, what's the name of our blog site again?
It's checkyourlogs.net.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.